Richard Gere, who once enthralled millions with his roles in Pretty Woman and American Gigolo, did not discuss a part, a movie, or an accomplishment at the age of 74. He just mentioned women. A straightforward admission that briefly stopped the world in its tracks. Since they were mistaken, I did not get divorced. I wasn't good enough to stay, so I got divorced. Love isn't about finding the perfect person, it's about being the right person at the right time, according to a guy who had 3 marriages and was once praised as the most charming gentleman in Hollywood. He had previously been the media's and movie industry's darling, married one of the world's top supermodels, and loved the most beautiful women on the globe. However, he didn't find a relationship he didn't have to hold on to until he was over 70. A lady who came to stay, not to alter him, and a love that didn't demand performance. She is the genuine love of Richard Gere's life, he added. This goes beyond a movie star's amorous journey. It follows a man's path from notoriety to loneliness, from anxiety to calm, and from dominance to comprehension, learning to love via growth, rather than instinct. Richard Gere was a lanky young guy from Pennsylvania, who played the trumpet, wrote music for school plays, and studied philosophy at the University of Massachusetts before he became a romantic movie star. However, he abandoned everything to seek a career in theater, where he could adopt a different identity, lead a different life, and maybe Richard Gere became accustomed to portraying the endearing man from a young age, both on and off screen. He had an alluring beauty and a calm, enigmatic personality that attracted women to him. However, Richard's early relationships came and went fast, passionate enough to be intoxicating, but never staying long enough to hang on, much like how he always seemed to evade classifications. From his Days of Heaven co-star Penelope Milford, who remained with him throughout the 1970s, to the brief but profoundly influential romance with Sylvia Martins, from the fiery model Carol Mallory, who once compared him to a jewel shooting across the sky, to Dawn Steele, an editor at Penthouse, who would go on to become the first female head of a major film studio in the US. The woman who brought him to Nepal opened his eyes to Buddhism and meditation, and she also introduced him to Tibetan lamas. They were bold, smart, and attractive ladies. However, at the moment, love was only a brief phase in Richard Gere's quest for self-awareness. He was rising, from Days of Heaven to American Gigolo, from searching for Mr. Goodbar. But he was also slipping into a place where no one had ever taught him how to keep a woman. The murmurs at gatherings, the flash bulbs used by paparazzi, and the lonely evenings spent in hotel rooms following filming. They all appeared to blur together, depicting a Richard Gere who exuded brilliance, but was empty on the inside. Maybe that's why he never really planned to get married. Even he didn't yet know what he needed, so the ladies kept coming and disappearing. Not secure enough to trust, not deep enough to hold. He was just aware of this. He was living quickly, and wasn't even close to stopping. In 1988, 39-year-old Richard Gere met 22-year-old Cindy Crawford, who had just been featured on the covers of the world's leading fashion magazines, at a barbecue party in Beverly Hills that photographer Herb Ritts had thrown. Their origins were 2 planets apart. She was the rising star of a fashion business on the verge of blowing up, and he was the actor who was once called the sexiest man alive. Then they surprisingly quickly and deeply fell in love. The world was enthralled shortly after they moved in together in New York. Too gorgeous, too well-known. Richard Gere, the dapper, suave guy. America's most beautiful woman is Cindy Crawford. They were everywhere. Advertisements, magazine covers, and red carpets. Turning became the 1990s most famous pair. However, there were 2 individuals moving at wildly disparate beats behind the lights. Cindy, a young lady who had matured too quickly in a bright environment, was still figuring out who she was and where to draw the boundary between her public persona and her true self. She was rushing from promotion to picture session in an effort to keep her body in check and win over those who wanted to make her a living brand. Richard, meantime, had grown weary of the crowds after 20 years as Hollywood's ideal man. He retreated into peaceful areas away from cameras, meditated, worked as a humanitarian, and sought tranquility. With silver foil rings and no guests or media, they were married in a very private ceremony in Las Vegas in 1991, just two people attempting to hang on to something lovely that was beginning to elude him. However, distance cannot be overcome by marriage. Cindy boarded aircraft as Richard pondered. She continued to move in an attempt to become the woman he needed, as he remained still and quiet. "I tried to become the woman he needed, and then I lost myself," she once stated. There was only a developing stillness, and two individuals living together like roommates. No scandal or treachery. Emotions and schedules are no longer in sync. They secretly got divorced in 1995. No lawsuits, no foul language. The only thing the media could write was a persistent question mark. What caused the ideal couple to split up? Richard eventually uttered one thing, briefly but sufficiently, some 30 years later. "I was in love with a lady who had no idea who she was yet. I believed that she might find stability via love. However, that was an unreasonable assumption. Nobody was in error. They simply didn't cross paths at the appropriate point in their lives. One was still in the air. The other had touched down already." Following his split from Cindy Crawford, Richard Gere avoided raucous relationships. He was no longer featured with young supermodels on magazine covers. Rather, he withdrew inside himself, studying Tibetan Buddhism, traveling around Asia, meditating and playing slower, more complex parts in movies. He then met Carey Lowell, a stunning, seasoned, composed lady who was once known as a Bond girl in License to Kill, as a peaceful adjustment, following emotional upheaval. Richard thought Carey was his last goal since she seemed like a calm refuge without any glamour or frenzied activity. In 1995, they started dating. Their son Homer James Jigme Gere was born in 2000, and they lived in peace together. At 51, it was Richard's first time becoming a parent. They were married in a private ceremony in 2002. Carey spent the most of her time as a mother in Pound Ridge, New York, a tiny family that chose to live away from the spotlight. There were no paparazzi, red carpets or media attention, and Richard maintained his humanitarian efforts while growing vegetables, reading, and making a few films. However, stability can occasionally be a delusion, brought on by parallel patience. Two individuals were gradually slipping out of each other's orbit behind that serene veneer. Richard has a very introverted personality. Immersed in retreats in Tibet or Nepal, he would meditate for hours on end, drawn to the ideas of quiet and detachment. Carey, meanwhile, still need movement, connection, and social space to feel alive, even if she was less frequently in front of the camera. They were spotted together less and less over time. During cinematic events and celebrations, one would leave, while the other would not. The schedules are no longer in sync. Silence had started to speak, but no one had spoken it out loud. Carey Lowell formally filed for divorce in 2013, following 18 years of dating and 11 years of marriage. Although irreconcilable conflicts were cited as the cause, individuals close to Carey disclosed more profound facts that suggested she felt excluded from her husband's world. She didn't possess the spirit's key to the house she resided in. Richard, however, continued to think that quiet is a sign of tranquility. He didn't comprehend that stillness isn't tranquility when it lasts too long until everything started to fall apart. "I didn't hear the signal," which is what it is. Financial issues, not emotional ones, caused the divorce to go on for 3 years. Numerous court cases resulted from assets valued over $45 million and real estate in numerous locations. They did one thing correctly, though. Despite the anxiety, Homer, their kid, was characterized as calm and sensitive, just like his father, and they decided to split custody of him. Following the divorce, neither Richard nor Carey spoke. There was only a profound, silent feeling that something was broken. Nobody turned on the others. Nobody got lost. That's all it was. Two people eventually lost the ability to touch because they were too honest about their true selves. Richard Gere almost disappeared from the media after Carey Lowell. No interviews, no red carpet pictures, no award shows. He was thought to have been a thoughtful soul, a parent and a meditator who had decided to live a quiet life. However, genuine love came just as he had given up looking. When Richard Gere's divorce from Carey Lowell was still pending in 2014, he suddenly showed up next to Padma, a model, novelist, and Top Chef presenter. Although it never made headlines, the connection piqued media interest. There were sporadic reports that Richard and Padma met at a charity event, spoke backstage for hours, and were periodically photographed dining together, but there were no hand-in-hand pictures or interviews proving a romance. Both had their own scars at the time. Richard was divorcing his wife of 18 years. Padma had recently recovered from her breakup with millionaire Ted Forstmann, her little daughter's spiritual father. Rather than a flash of fire, they discovered in one another a tired understanding. During those short months, Richard reportedly discovered in Padma a peaceful happiness, lengthy chats, straightforward meals, and the absence of any role to perform. However, they both realized that they were at quite different stages of life at the same moment. Stillness, meditation, serenity, Padma, fame, vibrancy, and the excitement of international events and television were all things Richard yearned for. After around 6 months, they ended their relationship amicably and without remorse. No altercations, no controversy. According to a close source, they concluded that since their lives were too busy going in different directions, it would be best to remain friends. If there was one lasting impression of their brief romance, it was that Richard Gere had slowed down and was no longer looking to fill a gap or love out of loneliness. He was coming to terms with the fact that peace cannot be imposed, and that love alone may not always be sufficient to keep someone around. The desire to search covertly may have diminished from that very location. Richard Gere started to let go of all hopes, and stopped looking for love and a miracle. Alejandra Silva, the last person to enter his life without making a sound, exerting pressure, or requiring a handhold, arrived at that very time. It's commonly said that love finds you when you stop looking for it. After 3 marriages, a series of enthralling but brief romances, and years of hopping between movie sets and monasteries, Richard Gere finally sat still. No pursuit, no attempt to establish anything. And Alejandra Silva came into his life at that same time, not as experienced on stage as Carey Lowell, not as stunning as Cindy Crawford. Alejandra Silva, a Spanish woman with gentle blonde hair, serene eyes, and the tender heart of a social warrior, never imagined that she would experience love once more. She was managing the Rise Foundation to fight homelessness in Madrid, raising her child alone, and just went through a divorce. I'd prefer not to do anything at all, after she publicly revealed that she had slept on the streets in order to comprehend the suffering of people without a place to live. They reconnected in 2014 at her family's hotel in Positano, Italy. Was discreetly ending his second marriage at the time. Weary, she was also buried in divorce documents. However, they failed to perceive the past when they looked at one another. They envisioned a tranquil future that they might create together. The initial step was taken by Richard Gere, silently, gently, not to win her over, but as a whisper. He made little melodies, sent flowers every day, and wrote handwritten messages. If you need someone at your side, I'm willing to remain. At first, Alejandra said no. The 33-year age difference worried her. She was aware of his international fame. Richard Gere persisted, even though she didn't want to be his next wife. He failed to convince. He waited. He was just patient and silent enough for her to realize that this was not another relationship. It was a house. In April 2018, they tied the knot in a small-scale Buddhist ceremony in New York. Alejandra had already converted, because she identified with Gere's beliefs, not because he asked her to. I didn't ignore the age difference, she stated. However, disagreements become secondary when the karmic energy between two people is sufficiently powerful. She also told Hola that meeting Richard Gere was like someone reaching out to guide her and take her out of the dark. I couldn't find my way. The light was him. Following the wedding, they relocated to the same quiet Pound Ridge mansion where Gere and Carey Lowell had previously resided. However, he did not construct fortifications this time. The doors were left open. They coexist as friends with no authority, no duties, and no expectations. Alexander, their first son, was born in 2019. Their second kid was born in 2020. Not the delight, but the name kept secret. Alejandra frequently posted pictures of family outings, meditation sessions, and their two kids reaching out to enjoy the fall sunlight on Instagram. She's the funniest, smartest, most sensitive, brave woman who knows what she wants. Gere famously remarked of his wife, "I don't have to pretend to be the ideal spouse, and I don't need her to be someone else. We don't need to explain that we live close." The kindest man I've ever met, Alejandra says. In addition to being a considerate spouse who composes music for her every morning and continues to give her flowers after they were married, he is also a calm parent. Putting his family first, he holds his kids as they go to sleep. The question, "How do you keep love alive?" is frequently asked. Gere doesn't wait for the response. Alejandra gives up trying. They move uncontrollably side by side. Instead of touching with anticipation, they do it with understanding. They don't try to be the same, but they do recognize their distinctions. One has a strong introverted personality and enjoys meditation and quiet. The other is actively involved, advocating for the homeless and human rights. They met because they had the same depth of beat in their souls, not because they were alike. Young people are not passionate about this. This is the love of two individuals who have lost their ability to love despite their past breakup. A man who has gone through 3 divorces. Ultimately, all parties recognized a lady who had experienced the devastation of marriage. Loving someone doesn't mean clinging to them. Never give them the impression that they must make an effort to stay. Richard once said, "She is the most generous woman I've ever known, with others and with me." In a rare instance while discussing his wife, a straightforward phrase that explains why. He didn't need to search any farther. Passion is the foundation of certain relationships. Commitment holds some together. Then there are relationships, such as the one between Gere and Alejandra Silva, that develop because both individuals were already entire and not because they were lacking anything. Neither entered with the intention of seeing. Neither wished for the other to make them better, finish them, or transform them into the person they had imagined. Like in the movies, she didn't need Richard to be romantic, and she didn't have to look like any lady Richard had ever met. With no one left to cling to, and nothing left to prove, they met. No need to display wedding images, no media contracts, and no need to appear in public. Alatu for Jom, preserved handwritten letters, Richard penned little songs every morning, and they had quiet dinners where their kids laughing muffled the sounds of daily life. People frequently claim that you should never make someone feel like they have to work so hard to stay if you want to keep them. Perhaps it took Gere a long time to realize that. Alejandra, on the other hand, realized that love isn't what causes you to lose yourself after years of excruciating sorrow following a divorce. Being able to be who you really are is the hallmark of the proper type of love. They don't attempt to dominate one another. No need to keep track of timetables. Feelings don't need to be justified. Like two individuals who have endured all the suffering and have at last discovered a space that is peaceful enough to allow anything to blossom, they just appear, are there, and live together with total understanding. There was a time when Gere's visage brightened every screen. He is now a man who lives in a home without any media at the gate. He no longer walks the red carpet, makes many press appearances, or responds to the same old interview questions at the age of 74. People are unaware of the movie he is working on because he may not be, or if he is, it's probably a low-key independent endeavor that doesn't require the Oscars or the box office. He now spends his time with Alejandra and their 2 young kids in a farmhouse in Pound Ridge, where the hills are shrouded in morning fog and the grass stretches beyond his knees, rather than behind camera lenses. Making tea or coffee for his wife without summoning an aide is how a typical day in his life goes. No paparazzi, just walking the dog down the stone path behind the home, gardening, reading Buddhist literature, and spending the evenings playing the piano for the children. And occasionally, taking kids to school in an outdated SUV without protection. No further sequences need to be filmed. Every day is authentic. He continues to have close relationships with humanitarian groups, particularly those that address homelessness, human rights, and Tibet. He now performs it all in silence, though. No prizes, no live streaming, no remarks. His wife Alejandra is still in charge of the Race Foundation in Spain. They don't perform charitable work to gain praise, they act in this way because it is morally correct. Additionally, they keep every moment with their family private. An image of a woodland stroll in the fall. From our house to yours, wishing you peace is the simple text for this Christmas photo. I don't need to be in Hollywood to know I still exist, Gere famously remarked. Maybe that's why he never made an official retirement announcement. He just decided to take a silent total step back, just living in the most compassionate manner, no more roles or performing. Richard Gere used to be well known for portraying affable, charismatic individuals, but these days he only plays one character, which may be the most significant in his life, that of a husband, father and calm man. Which of Richard Gere's romantic tales best resonates with you? Was it Cindy Crawford's glamorous marriage, Carey Lowell and the protracted silence, or Alejandra Silva's calm yet bright life? Leave a comment below with your opinions. Please leave a remark if you've ever thought that love never comes on time. To let us know that you also think Richard Gere's love story is real. I believe so. To ensure you don't miss the next articles on the life adventures of your favorite celebrities, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell.